This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
It's the Paradise Podcast.
I am your host, Ryan Michelle Bethay, with my husband, Sterling.
What's up?
Join us here on Hulu and Hulu on Disney Plus, where we'll discuss each episode with the cast and crew of Paradise. I'll be getting all the secrets from Dan Fogelman, James Marsden, Shailene Woodley, Julianne Nicholson, and Sterling Kelby-Brown. Woo! Paradise, the official podcast, is now streaming.
And stream Paradise on Hulu and Hulu on Disney Plus.
Most people think building wealth is the hard part. Work hard, build a business, invest in real estate, grow your portfolio. But what most successful entrepreneurs don't realize is that building wealth and protecting wealth are 2 completely different skill sets. In fact, the biggest threat to your wealth isn't often a bad investment. It's taxes, lack of coordination, poor planning. Many high-income professionals and business owners reach a point where they look up and realize something surprising. They have built millions of dollars in assets, but they've also accidentally built a massive tax problem. And the truth is, the ultra-wealthy approach is very different. They don't just focus on growing assets, they focus on structuring wealth intentionally. Inside family offices, the private organizations that manage wealth for the richest families in the world, every asset has a purpose. Some assets are designed for growth, others are designed for liquidity, some are designed for protection, and some are designed specifically for transferring wealth across generations. But here's the challenge. Most entrepreneurs in the $10 to $50 million range don't have access to a full family office, even though they're wealthy enough that they should be thinking like wealth. So how do you apply the strategies of the ultra wealthy before it's too late? Today's guest, Stephen Bowles, works directly with high net worth families, helping them solve this exact problem. In this conversation, we break down how the wealthy structure their balance sheets, why family offices think differently about risk, how life insurance is used as a strategic wealth tool, and one of the biggest hidden threats to generational wealth that most people never even plan for. If you're a business owner, investor, or high-income professional who wants to protect and transfer wealth intelligently, this is an episode you'll want to pay close attention to. So let's dive in. Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. We have Stephen Bowles for high net worth individuals, high income earners, business owners looking to preserve generational wealth and plan in advance. We're going to talk about how he works exclusively within family offices and those who are interested in this type of planning. Stephen, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Introduce yourself and we'll dive into the questions.
Stephen Bowles with Catalyst Advisory. I spent 7 years, came out of a family office in an advisory group within that family office that worked with other high net worth families on wealth transfer planning. 3 years ago, I set up Catalyst Advisory, where I continue to do that work with high net worth families. There's a gap in the marketplace where a family that doesn't need a family office but can benefit from some of the strategies within family offices need advice. That's the space that I advise in.
The topic for today, your ideal client, why they come to work with you?
My ideal clients are first generation wealth builders that pop their head up and say, oh, I'm heading towards an estate tax problem. I'm not sure what to do. They may not be there quite yet. The exemption's historically high. We're at 15 million per individual, 30 million for a family. If they own businesses, they're on that trajectory. They typically do own businesses, private equity, and real estate. That's the big balance sheet items that tend to be in my client avatar. They sit and say, this is generational legacy type of wealth. What do I do? I'm on social media. I've got my peers. They may or may not actually be my peers. I offer coaching around that and putting together strategies to take to attorneys for execution.
We were talking backstage and you were talking about family office strategies for the 15 to 50 million market and bringing best practices from the ultra wealthy to successful business owners and investors who are underserved by traditional wealth management.
If you think about the client avatar that we've discussed, they're very heavily into illiquid assets, businesses, real estate, private equity. If you have illiquid assets and high net worth, you're really not getting serviced by some of the private bank type of opportunities out there because they want liquid investments to all of their services. So there's this gap. That's the gap where we say, hey, what are the best practices of wealthy families that you're not seeing, you're not getting access to because you're not putting a bunch of assets under management at an organization that's going to tell you about those.
You talk about learn how the ultra wealthy structure their affairs to protect assets and transfer wealth efficiently across generations.
There's a few things we can touch on today, how family offices think differently and how can we apply that into our lives without structuring a formal family office. For folks that are listening that have heard that term but aren't super familiar with it, a family office is a private entity. They have employees that manage the family's world of wealth. This is asset management. This is all assets, everything around it. To include asset management, sometimes it's managing the needs surrounding a family, tax, legal, asset management, coordinating at that level. And then there's multifamily, fractional, virtual family offices, all of these things that can coordinate individual pieces or all of it. The key piece is there's a coordination effort. Our biggest takeaway is how are we coordinating tax, legal, investment strategies and eliminating silos? That's an application that many people can use in their own life. One of the things that we think about is like they're thinking about entire balance sheets. They're not thinking about here's my account at this place or here's my account at that place. They're thinking about entire balance sheets of their whole family, not just what's in their specific household. There's things that we can start to learn from that. Are my assets aligned with their purpose? Is the purpose for growth, liquidity, protection, transfer? We can all start to think about making sure our assets align with their purpose. And if we're seeing something that's not aligned with its purpose, realigning that.
This episode is brought to you by Cologuard. Do you know what's really scary? Not screening for colon cancer when you turn 45. The Cologuard test is non-invasive, requires no special prep or time off work, and ships right to your door. In just 3 simple steps, Cologuard takes the scare out of colon cancer screening. If you're 45 or older and at average risk, ask your healthcare provider about the Cologuard test. Cologuard is available by prescription only. Learn more or request a prescription today at Cologuard.com/screen.
The person on this trajectory, if they were to start to ask you the question, what is the first step in potentially saving millions in taxes and unnecessary fees?
The first thing we do is demystify what exactly are estate taxes and how does it apply to their balance sheet. Taking a look at that balance sheet, saying what happens today, 20, 30, 40 years generationally with that balance sheet. Then saying, okay, where does liquidity come from? Where is there risk in this balance sheet? We're not talking about risk return type of risk. That's how we think of risk. A lot of times the businesses, risk to the real estate, risk to the biggest asset on your balance sheet as a family, which is the family members. Are all of these risks covered? Do we have risks within our business with key people addressed? Oftentimes that's through documenting. Do we have documents in place that align with all the risks that we identify?
Quick pause here. If this episode is making you rethink how your income is structured, that's intentional. Information doesn't create freedom. Structure does. At the end of this episode, I'm going to show you how to diagnose whether you're building leverage or just scaling complexity. Let's get back into it. Next question I have is how the rich use life insurance strategies beyond simple death benefit coverage.
Wealthy families use life insurance differently. Typically, they're viewing it in a couple of different buckets. I've used the word risk a lot. They're seeing it as a de-risking asset. The major risk that life insurance covers is the risk of a loss of a life. Part of how they're looking at is, hey, here's an asset that has cash value. This cash value is guaranteed. It's tax efficient. Maybe I'm okay with this asset getting 4 to 6% returns because it's performing multiple roles. I've given it a different job. It's covering asset protected. It's in my trust. So it's creating liquidity for estate taxes. It's doing these other things. And that gives me now permission to go and do other things that are quote unquote riskier because it's a de-risking asset. Once they understand that, they're buying lots of it very differently than a lot of us are.
What types of life insurance are most popular for this market?
For this market, it's typically going to be owned in irrevocable trusts. Oftentimes, we're looking at a couple of different types, like whole life as just a general term. There's a lot of whole life that's purchased because of guarantees. But when we're talking about estate planning and estate taxes, there's something called survivorship policy. Survivorship policy pays out a death benefit at the second passing. The second passing is when estate taxes are due. There's a lot of use of survivorship life insurance within high net worth families' advanced estate planning.
You mentioned the people in this class. Are they income or asset rich?
What you're going to see is that most of the income is not W-2. If they have a lot of W-2 income, that usually is the very first target for trying to figure out how do we income tax plan, because it's the least efficient from the income tax perspective. So yes, there's assets that are building in value, but a lot of passive income.
Interesting. You mentioned businesses, real estate. What about gold, silver, oil, and Bitcoin?
That's changed a lot. When I first started 10 years ago, looking at balance sheets, I would say, okay, I know this client does X. They own this business, almost always a business owner. I'm looking at a balance sheet and I'm seeing real estate. I'm seeing all these different assets, all these little LPs. I didn't know what these LPs were. This was a learning curve for me, and understanding that LPs were their participation in private equity. I started to see that. Bitcoin has been probably the biggest asset class growth that I've seen over the last 5 years. In particular, I have several clients that are heavily into Bitcoin on their balance sheets. When I say heavily, I'm talking about it's probably 10% of their assets. So it has a point in there. Like 10% of a big number is a big number. Don't get me wrong, but they're including those as foundational in their holders. They're buying it and they're holding it. And yes, as we record this, we're currently in a quote unquote dip. They're not really that concerned about it because they're not selling. You're talking generational wealth. That's a great generational asset.
How about things such as fine art, Ethereum, Solana? Do you see much of that?
The answer is I see some of that. My big Bitcoin holders, my biggest clients that have the most cryptocurrency as an asset class are typically heavily into Bitcoin. Then a percentage of that is typically in others like Solana, Ethereum. Those tend to be the next most common assets. I have clients before that were very intentional about art, often using it as a hedge. Like they buy art, hold it for a while, use it as a tax strategy. I've seen that a few times. I don't personally have any clients right now that are using it as a major asset class. I don't have any right now.
Talk about some success stories of clients that you've served.
I had a client came to me about a year ago. I had some questions about a general trust. Trust is its own podcast. We could have tons of conversations about trusts. There's different kinds, so on and so forth. Had questions and I said, hey, here's what my educational engagement looks like. We had a great conversation, but we need to spend time together. And we spent about 6 weeks going through that. We were able to say, you as a family, you built a business, exited, have successful allocations into other asset classes. This is generational wealth. We started to look at how do we guard against the biggest erosion factors of generational wealth, which are estate taxes and income tax. Tax erosion is the biggest targets of that. We go through the education, then we start to put together different scenarios. We run those scenarios and say, what if we were to involve Dynasty Trust? For that particular client, we have a Dynasty Trust set up in a favorable jurisdiction. We have assets that are gifted there. We have assets that are being sold there. It's going to freeze the value of those assets, and that will grow generationally. It's protected against creditors and predators. People think about what if I get sued as being a creditor protection. The biggest creditor protection concern for most people, the risk of future ex-spouses of your beneficiaries You, as a formerly practicing doctor, the risk of getting sued is a huge concern. That's a very high risk. The risk is not nearly as high as future ex-spouses of beneficiaries that aren't even married yet, people we don't even know about. That has a much bigger risk to your overall family's legacy. Being able to plan and protect assets and trust correctly helps you ensure that this is actually going to make it down to those other generations.
There's talk about how they're wanting to tax billionaires on net worth and high income. How are you helping clients in these categories when they start taxing your net worth, stock portfolio, and your real estate? How are you planning for that?
The first thing that happens if it passes is all of the practitioners that serve high net worth families are going to go and look at what does the actual code say. There's tons of code, right? Thousands of pages of code. So once we understand what code says, right now we're talking in potential outcomes. We're going to look at the code, see exactly how it taxes, what assets does it tax, what isn't taxed, and how can we reposition assets so they're not taxed. Ultimately, people would rather be philanthropic than donate to the IRS. So we'll be looking at what is the best way to move those assets into the right category.
With the high divorce rate, are you seeing less marriages or is it just more prenups?
I'm not seeing less marriages. No, prenups are very common. Postnups common, but difficult. With good trust planning, it may not matter. Good trust planning can help G1 protect G2, even if G2 doesn't protect themselves.
Mm-hmm. How can people connect with you and learn more?
My website's catalystadvisory.io. My email address is Steven with a V at catalystadvisory.io. I'm on social media, YouTube, LinkedIn. People can reach out if they think that I can be helpful. When I have a meeting with somebody, if I think I can be helpful, I'll tell them. If I don't, then I'll tell them that too. If I can connect them with somebody, hey, you don't really quite need what I do, but you do need this person, I'll make some really good connections. I spend a lot of time making sure that my professional partners are top tier. I get a lot of them from my other clients. And so if I work with somebody who's really good within a family, they come within my fold. That's the best way to connect with me.
Thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me on. Hopefully this will be helpful.
Let's zoom out. If you're a physician, founder, or high-income professional, and you feel like you're working harder every year, but not structurally freer, you're not alone. The mistake isn't effort, it's architecture. This show exists to help you convert expertise into scalable leverage, faster and with fewer expensive missteps. Here's the diagnostic I mentioned before. If your income requires your constant presence, if your capital isn't compounding outside your profession, if your highest value talent is doing low value tasks, you don't have a growth problem, you have a leverage design problem. And if you want to fix it with clarity instead of guesswork, I offer a limited number of one-on-one leverage strategy sessions each month. We audit your income model, capital deployment, authority positioning, and structural bottlenecks, and design your highest return move. If you're serious about compressing years into months, the link to apply is below.